Coming up on Bullseye, we head to Texas to hang out with four-time world champion Tuff Hedeman, one of the most outspoken cowboys of his generation. In the first of two shows, we focus on Tuff and his best friend, the late Lane Frost.
He was, at that time, he's a high school kid, but he was already a star. Everybody knew who he was. He was a pretty boy. He rode great. Yeah. I just wanted to throw up in my mouth. It's kind of like Dale Earnhardt. You don't expect the best guy in the world to die doing what he does. If you're the best guy, how the hell do you die? I can remember like it was yesterday, having to call his mother. It was a pretty tough thing to do.
Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Metters. Welcome to Bullseye. The first time I met Tuff Hedeman, it was January of 1986. I was a very green sportscaster in Midland, Odessa, Texas. My boss sent me to the Odessa Rodeo to do a story with the next big thing in bull riding, a guy named Tuff Hedeman. As it turned out, next big thing may have been a pretty major understatement. When you look at the three big stories that have shaped modern bull riding, Tuff's an integral part of all three. Number one, the life and tragic death of bull rider Lane Frost. Number two, the founding of the PBR. And number three, a nasty yellow bull named Bodacious. In the first of two shows with Tuff, we talk about Tuff and Lane Frost, best friends, world champions, and two cowboys forever immortalized in a movie. How'd you meet Lane? What, instant friendship, instant rivalry?
Well,
what was it?
I met him when I was in high school at Yakima, Washington, and he was, at that time, he's a high school kid, but he was already a star. Everybody knew who he was. He was a pretty boy. He rode great. Yeah. I just wanted to throw up in my mouth, because he was everything that you would want to be. He was a good guy. And once you met him, I didn't want to like him because I knew I wasn't him. I didn't think I could be him because he was the coolest guy that you'd ever meet or be around. He was I would laugh at him because, he wouldn't, he wouldn't allow people to see him, whenever he was mad or, upset or whatever. He was just very aware. And that's kind of what he was taught. Freckles Brown, and his father were buddies, and, he said, that's, nobody cares about that. Your job is to be a professional and, treat people, everybody, the same as you'd want to be treated. And, he had a huge impact on what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. And he was a great bull rider. He was a gutsy guy, he was a tough guy. People thought because, he was such a good-looking guy and kind of soft-spoken at times that, that they didn't really truly understand how gritty and how tough he really was.
Tuff and Lane's friendship may be the most famous in all of rodeo. It was one built on bull riding. Who dreamed that this dangerous sport would bring it all crashing down?
Seeing that happen, you question and wonder, what the hell are you doing?
Bullseye is brought to you by Cinch Jeans and Shirts. Hedeman and Frost were dominant. Tuff won his first PRCA world title in 1986. Frost his first and only in 1987. They were both contenders again in 1989, but everything changed in July in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Cheyenne Frontier Days is a legendary rodeo, and taking care of business would be the last bull ride for Lane Frost. You lose Lane, how does that change life for you?
That was the most horrible thing ever. It was, when you're growing up doing this, you see people get hurt. You see, a kid that had rode with us and been to some rodeos, his name was Jeff Crockett, that had got killed, I think probably the year before Lane, or but you don't think, you know, you don't think it's going to be you. And it's kind of a mindset that you kind of have to BS yourself and thinking it's not that big a deal. Pretty simple. Make the whistle, get off under your own power, and you're not going to get hurt. Or if you do, you're not going to get hurt that bad. But seeing that happen, you question and wonder, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this?
Did you think about giving it up, or?
Probably for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's just kind of who we were. That's what we did. That's all we wanted. I couldn't think of doing anything else, but I can just say, you know, I can remember like it was yesterday, you know, having to call his mother. The first rodeo I went back and got on was in Casper, and it was a pretty tough thing to do. You know, I think it just brings, you know, the realness and, you know, the humanity of it all to, this shit's real.
The final bull in the 10th round that year, there's a extra 8 seconds. What's the reality of all that?
Well, it was, you know, it just turned into a very grueling, tired, miserable year, you know. And, you know, it was, I was having a good year, and he was having hell. You know, he'd gotten smoked in Fort Worth, and, you know, messed up his teeth, and he'd gotten, you know, and he was pretty famous for his wrecks, and his wrecks were because he and I were a lot alike in terms of we both pulled our rope really tight. We used a lot of rosin, and if we got bucked off, we weren't just coming off. We were tied to him. So yeah. If you're tied to him, you better be able to ride. And you know, he had said, you know, yeah, he did tell me, say, yeah, well, I guess this is your year. And I said, well, I guess we'll see. But we get to the NFR, and you know, I'm riding as good as I can. You know, my riding never did affect my riding. It just affected how miserable I was every day when I would wake up. And going into the last day, for me to win it, Jim Sharp has to get bucked off, and I have to win no less than third in a round to win it. And I said, that can't happen, because I never thought Jim would get bucked off, and then he gets bucked off for Mr. T, and I rode a bull that I didn't know a lot about. They hadn't ridden him hardly. They hadn't ridden him very far, and he tried for about 4 seconds and then gave it up. And I wasn't very many points, but last round they didn't ride a whole lot. But I guess whenever I knew I rode him, the relief of all of that, it was the first sense of like peace, pleasure, excitement, or whatever, just to a really, really crappy year. And I was just glad it was over. I'm the only guy ever that got questioned, how much money is it going to take for you to leave and never come back? Because they were shooting a scene, and it was just, I don't remember what it was, ridiculous. And they were rolling tape, and I just walked down the middle of the set. I said, bull, baloney. I think that's what I said.
The death of Lane Frost was a major story. While it tore out Rodeo's heart, it also tugged at the heartstrings of an entire nation. His life and death was a story that needed to be told. It had to be told, and it didn't take long before Hollywood came calling. How'd the movie come about?
You know, well, everybody kind of, you know, he was a big star in rodeo, you know, even when he was younger, and you know, he'd won a world championship, and it's kind of like Dale Earnhardt. You don't expect the best guy in the world to die doing what he does. You're the best guy, how the hell do you die? There was a lot of interest. It was at the Cheyenne Frontier Days, which is a rodeo that has history like no other, and just those factors, and Hollywood. It's an impressive story, but the process of it all is pretty. You think rodeoing for a living's hell? Go the movie business. I'm the only guy ever that got offered or questioned how much money is it going to take for you to leave and never come back, because the director, they had a pretty high-profile director, a guy named John Avildsen, who had directed Rocky, and one of the directors on the set. He's the dictator, he's God, nobody questions what he says or does. And they'd went through 2 or 3 different scripts, of which I thought they had a couple scripts better. The whole thing for me was, and even talking to Lane's parents, Clyde and Elsie, was that if you're going to do it, just do it as he was, and if that's not entertaining enough, then don't do it.
Yeah.
But don't make up a bunch of that is untrue to make it, quote, entertaining. If what happened and how it happened wasn't entertaining enough, then don't do it. Go make a movie and call it, Joe Blow, whatever. I don't care. But they were shooting a scene, and it was just, I don't even remember what it was, ridiculous. I mean, they were rolling tape, and I just walked down the middle of the set. I said, baloney. I think that's what I said. And it was a major ordeal. But
so did you not get to finish the movie?
I just basically told him, I said, I don't care. Yeah. I said, this was his life. This is our life. You're not going to make it something that's not. So you think you can sell a few more tickets? No, I don't care. You can't pay me enough to leave. You can't get rid of me. I mean, Luke and Steve, Luke Perry, Stephen Baldwin, great guys. They worked extremely hard to do right and do justice, and especially Luke, and Stephen as well. But they had to get me over in the corner, and we had to kind of massage a few things. But I think it turned out better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it could have been better. They made up a little BS here and there, but I think it truly captured who he was, what he was about, the kind of person he is. And even today, more people know bull riding and rodeo through Lane Frost than anybody in the history of the sport. I think it really did capture who he was and what he was about, and some of the insignificant details didn't really matter. He was a great guy. He was a gutsy, passionate. He was a genuine guy that if you were broke down, he would stop and help you. If you were broke, he would give you his last dollar. He was one of those guys. He was a true friend. He was never a guy that he just wasn't selfish at all. Luckily for me, we got to be good friends. Are you kidding me? You're a pain in the ass. You could have died. How come you didn't die?
How often do you come up and take a look at your memorabilia and remember?
Never.
Just on your rearview mirror?
Never, yeah.
It's nice to have it though. I mean,
no, it's
like when I come over, I love seeing it.
It's cool, but most all my go-round buckles, or all my what I would consider maybe prestigious buckles, the majority I've given away. So, I mean, it's nice, but I'm just not a, hey, come up here and look at all my cool stuff. I'm a big deal. I won this, I won that, I won this, I won that. Did you want to see it? It's just, I appreciate it, but it's not that big a deal. I don't like to brag about what good I did in the past, and I don't want to really brag about the bad I did in the past, because there's a little bit of both.
Obviously, you had good years in '86 and '89.
They were all good years. You know, I remember when I had 13 in 91, everybody's like, oh, that's unlucky. And I'm like, I've never been superstitious ever, but I remember on that Friday the 13th, on the last weekend, I had number 13. I was 91, had the highest marked ride of the week. So I leave my hat on the bed. I don't have a lucky shirt. I'm not big on. I figure if I suck, it was probably not because I drew the bad number. Had probably more to do with me.
What have you done for me lately, business? Tell me about that shirt right there.
Well, the thing was is that he never actually saw that poster, because we did the photo shoot for Panhandle. I think it was in late June, and the first time we ever saw anything, we got to Cheyenne, and there was on the back cover of the Sports News, there was an ad of just he and I, and that's the only one that we had seen. And then, you know, then it was a few days later when he was killed, and you know, we saw that after, and you know, they never actually ran the ad. They had all kinds of those posters already printed. And I think they gave them to like the Justin Crisis Fund. They gave them to them, but they never did use it. But yeah, so I had, yeah, at the NFR in the 10th round, that was the shirt I wore.
Only time you ever wore it?
Yeah.
It's quite a story.
Yeah, it was a long year.
When we come back, Tuff's bull riding days are certainly behind him, but his parenting days are just beginning again. He now has a young cowboy named Riker that is certain to keep him in line.
Other than losing your cowboy hat, we've done pretty good, huh? Oh well. There was me and, you know, one of my brothers and a couple sisters. We were going to the pasture to gather some cattle, and we get about 150 yards from the barn, and I'm on a big horse, and I'm not very big at the time. I'm probably 4 or 5, and as soon as my grandfather got up to open the gate, my horse just turned around, took off running to the barn, and at that time I thought it was really fast, and I was screaming and crying. He comes back to the barn, and I'm crying. He looked at me and said, "Hell, I thought you were gonna be a cowboy." And so I never forgot that, but you know.
Underestimated you.
Well, you know, marginal maybe at best, but. Up on your reins.
This?
And then just hold them snug. That way she'll stand still. And then you make her go. How do you make her go? You put your hands down and kick her a little bit and say, "Come on." And that way she'll go.
So you get Robert Lane and Trevor raised, and now I know Riker's energized you, but man, there's got to be some challenges raising a kid in this climate.
Well, I feel like I've been successful with Lane and Trevor that neither one of them wanted to ride bulls for a living. So that's a win. Riker scares me because, you know, even Trevor one time when he was, you know, they got on some calves and steers when they were young because that's what they wanted to do. But, you know, the thought of them doing it for a living, I mean, Trevor, when he was actually about 15, said, "Oh, want to get on some bulls." And I took him upstairs and I said, you know, "Come here, I want to show you something." So I made the NFR 12 times. I said, every year there's 150 guys. They're going to go to the NFR this year. I said, but only 15 do. I said, so those are the top 15 for those 12 years. I said, the better you are at it, then the better chance you're not going to be seriously injured or killed. I said, but that really doesn't mean anything. You have a better chance. If you're like Jim Sharp and you make the whistle every time, you land on your feet, very seldom do you get hurt. But at some point in time you are. And I said, so I just want you to understand, I pointed out 3 guys. I pointed out Glenn Keeley, I pointed out Brent Thurman, and I pointed out Lane Frost. I said, those guys were my friends. And he was my best friend. And I said, I watched him die 20 feet in front of And I said, oh yeah. Pointed Chuck Samson, Drum Douglas. I said, and those guys are in a wheelchair. And I said, these guys were great bull riders. Not good, they were great bull riders. I'm not telling you what to do or not to do. I said, I just want you to understand, bull riding it's not for a lot of people. For me, it's the coolest thing ever. I loved it, and everything I have is because of it. I have no idea how I lived through it. I said, but one ride can change your life. I said, you do whatever you want to do. I'll help you. If that's what you want me to do, I will. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I hope he doesn't want to do this. Because I mean, when it's your kid, I know lots of people that, their kids are in a wheelchair and never walk again, or like I said, worse than that, they died.
At least Trevor grabbed a rope, not a bull rope, just a rope.
Yeah. And then figured out he couldn't make a living doing that, so.
In the mid-1990s, Tuff got off to a really good start over the first couple of rounds at the National Finals Rodeo. I passed him in the hall and said, hey man, you're killing it. He kind of looked at me funny, cocked his head and said, hey man, it's not even halftime yet. Well, it is halftime for us. Next week on part 2 with Tuff Hedeman, we'll talk about his biggest nemesis, the yellow bull called Bodacious. And we'll get a glimpse of Tuff the businessman, from founding the PBR all the way to his new Tuff Hedeman bull riding tour. Thanks for watching. So long, everybody.
I recovered from that, but I always heard people, and well, I never was as good after that, and they're probably right. You're not good enough to be mad. I just enjoyed that you're out here on the golf course, but you're not good enough to be mad.